Good evening. I understand I'm the last speaker before the summation. Not a very good hour. And the heroes that are left in the hall, I don't want to ruin your day, but I'll try to talk about a different phase. Although this is a day of celebration, 25 years, it's very nice. I personally remember Oded 25 years ago visiting me in Beijing. I was the first commercial attaché of Israel in China, and you visited China in 1989 after the Tiananmen Square, where there was still a curfew. And then Sin at the time was really in the beginning of its very openness. And I must say that in the last 25 years I've been visiting Sin, it completely changed. You know, I used to go with my little redhead son on a bicycle. I'm not going to do that anymore, because there's no question that China, from the physical change, has changed immensely. It's a completely different China. And one thing didn't, and that is the Chinese people. Well, it's true that they went through a lot of upheavals, but at the end of the day, we are in a country with a very long tradition. And although they introduce a lot of technology, things don't change that quickly. I know you heard a lot, but very briefly, I would like to give you the data and to summarize whatever we heard today. The main thing, I want to talk about the relations with Israel, that we heard so many superlatives today and so many wonderful ideas that I'll try not to ruin the day. As you can see, you see the numbers. They're quite amazing. And you see also, as far as the residents are concerned, really, today the biggest country, the largest, and next week we're going to have the Prime Minister of India, and they say they're following China. The interesting is the demographic profile of China as opposed to India. The average age in China comes close to 40, medium age, and India it's 27, 28. China is an aging country. Its future from a demographic point of view is behind it. It's not in vain that they said that the one-child policy changed it. But if you look at the last or the next 30 years, China is going to have huge problems. Never mind all the psychological problems with the one child and the whole family problems and the economic problems of how to deal with the elderly. These are huge problems. There's no bigger challenge in China. As the speaker said before me, every challenge is an opportunity. No question that it's also an opportunity how to do with an elderly country. But India is the next thing. Economically as well, maybe. And the Chinese language, everybody wants to study Chinese. It's the most spoken language in the world. Here, very interesting. Although I'm an economist, I also look back to the history. You see here the last 1,000 years, and that we go back to what was the size of China in the world GDP. The red was, and it reduced during the colonialism and then communism, and now in the new era, you see China is re-expanding. So just to show you that what happened in the last 1,000 years. We also spoke about the huge growth of the PPP, and the most interesting thing, just to sort of to feel things. Take a look here. In 1980, the average income of the Chinese person or American was 42-fold than the Chinese. Today, it's only 4 times bigger, the American compared to the Chinese. This is a huge change. What happened? It's not that the Americans lagged behind, but the gap was bridged in an incredible way. Here you can see that China already surpassed the United States. Here you see the trade. China really, one of the things that's very difficult to understand are the dimensions, huge dimensions. China today is leading in manufacturing of cars and of course agriculture. Here it's the number of telephones. Chinese are very much like that. Everybody has a smartphone in his hand. They spoke about energy. The lady said here the consumption of coal in China as opposed to the entire world. You see that China almost consumes coal like the entire world. And energy is definitely a huge challenge with everything that entails. Obviously, if we talk about the pollution and all these things, this is a real problem. And here I come to Israel, but that too is a slide which is amazing. You can see that China, 20% of the economy of the world and 3% of the GDP. Here, as far as raw materials, how much it controls. Or if there'll be a slowdown in China, will it have an impact on the world? And what about consumption in China? How does it impact the prices of all the commodities? Because the manufacturing in China is 60% of what's happening in the world. You talk about steel, you talk about lead. It gives you dimensions that put things into proportions, and we can't even cope with these numbers. Something that wasn't mentioned today, the issue of the problem of being pressured or blackmailed. There's an index of corruption, and this is a very big problem in China today, the fight against corruption, led by the President Xi Jinping. Where was it? Here. The issue of corruption, very problematic. I must say that I got the last report that was published in the OECD about the China Working Group. It checks what is the climate of businesses in China for foreign companies. It doesn't talk about corruption, but the last report of a week ago, 80% of the foreign companies that are active in China today, and that was published by the OECD, feel less corruption in China today than in the past. Of course, if we talk about former years, they feel that it's more difficult to do business today, not because of it, but the business environment in China is not becoming lighter or easier. And corruption is one thing, but yes, something which is very interesting, and we should pay attention to it, is the investment of China in R&D. Because China invests in R&D, sees it as the next coming thing. It's made in China. Also is something that it wants to lead. And one very important thing, I took in a snapshot with the Chinese, there's a 5-year plan. And today, it's the 13th 5-year plans. And you should look at it, because as opposed to a country I know very close, when you say something in China with the decisions of the government, usually they implement it, they do it. And here you can see these are the priorities for the next 5 years. That's where China is heading. And our wisdom is how to connect to these things, if at all. And by the way, some of these things are so that we don't connect to. Maybe China here, when it goes towards innovation, then it doesn't want to buy outside, it wants to do it itself. And then this whole idea of working with China with innovation, it's good for a certain period until they don't need us anymore for innovation. You have to think about it as well. Where is it going to? How can we? So it's true that the Technion established there its campus. Very nice. What does it give the Technion today? It does. But maybe in 5 years' time, they'll decide we're okay, we're alone, forget it. They'll stop the connection. I'm just hypothesizing. And then we transferred everything there. And I didn't say this yet, and I see that Yafa is pressuring me already. I say it always. What do we get out of it? We, as the Israeli economy, is it more employment in Israel? Does it create more export? What do we? I'm not talking about private business people and individuals that can make money. We, as a society, as an economy, Do we get all the benefits we can from the connection with China? They spoke about a huge potential. I'm not so sure about it. Let's talk about infrastructure, environment. Okay, that's their priorities. Health, they definitely want to change, and we have what to offer. Finally, they'll get it and do it by themselves. Services and all these things. I'm saying, let's look at it and see where, at least in the next 5 years, we can connect. Because until today, and you see the dimension, you see the size, where are we and where are they? We're very little. But until today, our trade, with all due respect, is just dragging along. And I don't think our future is in trade with China. So if you look at it, the blue is what we import. So of course we import everything from China and we export much less. Economically, usually when there's a small country and there's a big one, so the big one is a very big market that the small country can sell to. So it's more natural that a small country will sell to a bigger country than the opposite. Here it's exactly the opposite. Why? Because again, it is very difficult to penetrate into the Chinese market, and it's easier to penetrate the Israeli market, especially today. I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself. Today I worked in the Industrialists Association. Today we promote import, and that's a problem. But we are an example which is completely, if you talk about economical language, something is happening that's wrong. How can it be? Look, and worse than that, if you look at what do we sell to China, this big, developing, rich country, 63% we sell two companies, or maybe three. That's the composition of our export. Intel, Israel, it was said already, sells to Intel, China, so it's not real trade. And Israel Chemicals, yes, very nice. But all the other products, if you take the chemicals and the machineries, now we see some health, medical devices, but here I compare what was in 2010 and 2016. We didn't upgrade, we didn't improve, we didn't have a different priority. But even from 40%, it grew that part, which is only 2-3 companies, and we cannot break through. If you look at this table, we take 10 Israeli companies, do 72% of the export to China. Yafa spoke about it. Other people spoke about it, so I can say, okay, just a second, but around these 10, there are other small ones that give services. Okay, maybe that's true, but this centralization is very problematic. And the question is whether it has to be this way. Why is it like that? What brought it? Can it change? I ask questions. I don't have too many answers. I've got many more questions than I have answers, but I think that there's a real problem here. And actually, what happens today, I don't know if we exhausted the trade with China. I think that there's a problem to penetrate. I think that we don't have the horizon of business. I always said, I think it was the Kur representative at the time in 1990, he said, the People Republic of China, the P, should need patience. Now, patience is something that we do not have. You know it. We do everything here, now, and immediately. So an Israeli company wants very quickly, it doesn't work. It doesn't go in China. The R of the People Republic of China is relations, what we call the fact that we are very nice and smiley, we know how to make connections, and we don't come with a colonialist background. Really, we are two peoples, ancient, with a horizon of from Feng Fu to God knows where, the Jews, etc. So many common things. Yes, we connect very nicely, and it works greatly. So we have the R, the relations. From out of the POC, patience we don't have, relations we do have. Very nice, very easy, people are nice, but the C is the cost, meaning it costs a lot of money. So show me an Israeli who is willing to invest a lot of money, a lot of time, and he's not sure he's going to see the results. So in order to work in China today, you have to invest. Flights are expensive. You have to open an office there. Today, the salaries of Chinese people there is very high. Is there any strategy for companies? I'm not talking about the state. Companies are ready to look 50 years ahead before I think there's a problem. It's a question of a business culture in Israel, which really doesn't go together with the Chinese one. In spite of the smiles and the nice and whatever, we have to find a way. And here, really, we must, if we want to succeed in China, we have to adapt ourselves to their business culture. They're not going to adapt themselves to us. We have to get people who will understand and get it. So scholarships and trips, all this is fantastic and great because we cannot avoid China. But maybe we will not be part of the celebrations. Maybe China doesn't want anybody to celebrate together with them. They want to celebrate themselves. And maybe in China they know how to use. And I would do the same thing. I would take advantage of the global environment for my goals. And the problem is that they're very big and they take advantage. But of course, what do they do today? Now, beyond the process, they have the investments. These are investments of Chinese people in Israel. They come here. These are all the transactions and businesses, 300 R&D centers in Israel. In the beginning, it used to be American companies. Today, we have Chinese companies who come here. And again, the kind of investment they invest either in startups, and then this whole discussion, good, bad, they bought it cheaply, is it right, is it correct? I don't go into it just now. And by the way, I wrote down, and I think that summarizes everything I want to say. The ambassador said, you're very good from going from 0 to 1, and we go from 1 to 100. So who makes a profit? The one who goes from 0 to 1 or 1 to 100? I didn't say it, he said it, the ambassador was here. So they come to the startups, we went from 0 to 1, they take it from 1 to 100. Great. So I'm saying these are the investments in the startups. And by the way, it's a bit over because today, China itself today, they also invest in more cautious way abroad, but they also invest through venture funds. But instead of doing it directly, they come and they invest it here. That's from last year in venture funds. And that's a very good way. Why not? And again, I don't think people spoke about Chinophobia. I'm not a Chinophobe. Not at all. I like this Chinese very much. I like the food, the place. It's a wonderful country. And you don't have to take the Chinese, Tnuva and Elko and all these things they invested in for many years. Tnuva anyway was already purchased by somebody else, so there's no difference whether it's an American company or a Chinese company. What does it mean? But there is one difference, and that is that behind every Chinese company that buys a company in Israel, we don't know what stands behind them. We don't know. Namely, we don't know. You agree with me? We know. We do know. He says, we know, but we don't want to know. We don't want to know. So there's a question here. Is it good? Is it bad? What? The party there, they want to stop. What's going to happen? Maybe there are other interests. Maybe there's something else that we don't know about. And the worst thing, we don't know, we cannot anticipate for sure what's going to happen in the future. The situation of actually when you have, I know people didn't speak about it, we're celebrating 25 years, but to make business with a totalitarian country is not the same as a democratic country. Transparency, the law and order, I hope the ambassador is not there, he still has to go back to China, but you have to call a spade a spade. There's an embassy here, but I think there's a problem. In the meantime, it's working well, that's okay. But let's not forget. So, here, these are one of the things people ask, why did they buy Tnuva, the biggest dairy company in Israel? Why did they buy that? Why did they buy that? Why? The main problem today in China is food security. Food security of the food they eat. And a few years ago, there was a big scandal in China that babies died who ate, like unfortunately happened here as well with Remedia. And if I'm a Chinese company that wants to continue to grow in China, I look to have a foreign company to create some sort of a positive image to my clients. And if I buy, by the way, they didn't buy just in Israel, they bought all sorts of dairies all over the world to bring new technologies and to get a new signature that they're secure and that they're okay and they're fine. So Tnuva, there's no problem. There's Chem China. It's potash work. It's very, very good. And Chem China bought the biggest competitor of the Agan Machshashim. So what will they decide out of these two? Which ones will they develop? The one in Europe or the one in Israel? And maybe we'll see that they'll decide to dry out the Israeli one. Did anybody think when they sold it that they need some sort of a mechanism, some supervision? I don't know, I'm just asking. I have no answer. And the fact that they're in Haifa today and in Ashdod, and the railways, and the tunnels. Is it good? Is it bad? These are questions that I think that as a state we have to ask. And we have to talk about something that everybody said, but this I owe to Captain Or, who's here. Is he here? Yes. He's the head of Raspan. This, everybody spoke about one route, one bend, and you see the red line, and now it's the blue one, and the Chinese actually are creating new roads or new ways, all sorts of corridors to connect to the sea. I'm not a big expert on it, but there's no question that here there's a huge idea. Whether it's just a gimmick or is behind it million things, I don't know. Yafa came back so enthusiastic from the speech of Xi Jinping. Very nice. I read other articles, they say it's all nothing and together with nothing. I have no opinion. We have to look at the things from both sides. So here, geographically, you see, and I know that Captain Maor gave the name The Magic to this part. Mediterranean, Arabian, Gulf International Corridor. And the Chinese loved it. Of course, this is politics. In order for this to work, that the borders, you need. These are not Chinese maps, they're our maps, he says, Vilnai. No, they go from the north, they can come. So that can be a very interesting idea, why not? And if it connects here, and the Chinese want stability and prosperity, and everybody loves everybody, then this is the 0 to 1. Yeah, that's it. 0 to 1. And actually, no question that there's a huge opportunity here for geopolitical changes here in the region. And this is actually, these are the ways and the paths. So look, I just ask questions. Do we have a strategy? Economic strategy? Do we need one at all? And is this really the target? The fact that we have 3 commercial attaches in China, maybe it's so good that you need 6, because the numbers that come out are not, they're not such huge numbers. But everything was so good today. Do you have to spoil everything? I'm just asking questions. I said, there are 6 now. I say, why? If it's so difficult, maybe they need 6. But I don't think that China is the future of the Israeli economy. So we do not agree. Okay, good, fine, we cannot agree. I think that India and Korea and Japan are much more interesting partners, because I don't believe that the Chinese at the end of the day, India, Japan, Korea, I repeat, I think are much more interesting, more potential, Because again, when you're so huge, you can't cooperate with a very small country. I'm telling the truth. This is what's all about. So I know I'm a minority opinion, but I think that if we look at the 5 last years, the rise in the export to China wasn't that great. It's the elephant in the room, and we kept saying it, the Americans. And people said, what are going to be the relationship between America and China? And we're in the middle. I don't want us to be in the middle. And today, Israeli companies with advanced technologies do not dare approach China because they don't want to be contaminated with Chinese contact because they work in the United States. That's what's happening. Maybe they're mistaken. But they're the ones who make the decision. So maybe this whole agreement that doesn't exist between me and China and the Americans and what is good for the Americans, they don't allow to do us. Maybe you have to open it. Now with Trump, is this the time to open it? Do you think Bibi is going to come to Trump and say, let me sell more things to China? And Trump will say, go ahead, be my guest. So you do believe in it, I believe in it, but I believe that you have to focus. You have to know where to navigate. Okay, health equipment, good, medical, but water, great. You heard about my project with water? When did it start? Is anything happening with it? No, I'm asking a question. I asked the first day, who pays for this? They said they'll take a city. Okay, demagogy, we all know. This is really demagogy. This is not the forum for that. Okay, with the water city, I think is a wonderful idea, but the state of Israel didn't invest enough money in it, I think. The state of Israel didn't put 1 penny there. But it will be there. The water city is going to be built, says Vilnai. Well, let's wish, let's hope. מתן? Ladies, gentlemen, agriculture, great. Medical equipment, great. But also medical equipment. They produced medical equipment until they became bigger and bigger, and then one day they said, just a second, that's it, you have to manufacture in China in order to sell in China. So he himself, he has no choice. He's going to do it, he's going to become rich. Is that going to produce more employment in Israel? It won't, it's a problem. Let's call a spade a spade. So it's great, it sounds good, everybody's running to China, but you have to know, to be sober about it.
Danny,